and lasting, successful business that transforms lives. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put the steps up on the screen. And I'm actually going to share my story as we go through these steps today. So you can see these steps in action in my story, and then you can take them and implement them in your own story. So step number one, whenever you're telling your story, I always want you to start by talking about what was your life like before it works. Before it works, I was a stay-at-home mom of 4. I had dropped out of college at the age of 18, so I didn't have a degree. And I got married super young, and by the time I was 25, I had 4 kids. I honestly felt like my life was on fast forward. I felt like I couldn't keep up. We were constantly living, just reacting to everything negative that was happening to us, and I felt like I didn't have the time to pursue my dreams, the things that I really wanted out of life. I remember lying awake at night and asking God, isn't there more than this? Isn't there a solution? Isn't there a way for us to get ahead? And I didn't know if one existed. I didn't know if I would be able to get that little bit extra that we needed to make ends meet as a stay-at-home mom of 4. My husband was already working more hours than I felt like he even had in the week. He was leaving before the kids were awake and coming home after I was already putting them to bed. And I was frustrated. I wanted to do all of life with him. I didn't want him missing out on those moments because he was just trying to pay the bills. That didn't feel like a real life to me. And I asked God for a way out. Okay, so I just painted a picture of what my life was like before I found this business. And I created a space, a gap, for there to be a solution to come in. So I paved the way for It Works to come in as a solution. So when you're sharing your story with potentials, you want to create the need for It Works so that they can see themselves in that same need or in that pain. 80% of your storytelling should take place in step 1. Painting that picture of what life was like before it works. And the reason why is that this is your opportunity to connect emotionally with your audience. Because pain causes us to have a reaction. Pain instigates that knee-jerk reaction or that feeling of wanting to get away, right? When we have a painful feeling or there's a painful memory of being terrified at the grocery store, the heat's rising up your neck, there's a lump in your throat because you don't know if your card's going to go through, and you don't know if you're going to be able to buy the groceries that you need to bring home to your family for the week. You're embarrassed, you're anxious, you're nervous, you're sweating. Anybody can relate to that moment. If you've ever had a moment where your cards declined, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that that's a painful feeling, and it's a feeling that you would do anything to never have again. Pain instigates reaction. So we want them to be able to experience that moment of pain with us before we started our business so that they can say, hey, there's something in my life too that needs to change. Something I'm tired of. A feeling that I keep having that I hate, that I don't want to ever have again. And the reason we spend 80% of our time telling our story in step number 1, talking about before the business, is because that's where our audience is. They are not part of the business. So we want to relate to them where they're at so that they can feel like we are the same. Because when you feel like you're the same with someone, that creates a level of trust that can open the door to becoming a business partner with someone. Because you feel like they know where you are. They've walked in your shoes. They've sat where you've sat. They've had those same experiences. And when we constantly focus on the successes, the parts that came after the business, we actually polarize ourselves from our audience because we are now spending too much of our time in a place that they haven't been yet, that they can't understand until they get there. So number 2, we're going to tell them how we found the business. For me, this is where I always transition into saying that as I was praying for a solution in my life, I started seeing Instagram posts from a girl who was talking about a business she was working on her phone. She was able to travel. She was able to pay off debt. She had all kinds of freedom that I was still just praying for. And I started to wonder if that could be an opportunity for me too. So this is just where you tell them where you found the business, whether it was Instagram, in person. You want to relate to them in this part too, because just like you suddenly found the business and you didn't always know about this, they're just finding out about the business too. And then number 3, you're going to cover your skepticisms. This is where I usually say that I saw her posting on Instagram, but I was so hesitant because I didn't know if I was the kind of person she would want to work with. I didn't know if I had a good enough social media following to be successful at something like this. I was from a small town. I was busy with kids. I didn't think I'd have time for something like this. So I casually insert my skepticisms because that way I'm addressing their objections without them feeling put on the spot. They don't feel exposed because I'm just talking about my skepticism, so I'm not talking about theirs. I'm not confronting theirs by saying some of you feel this way, some of you think this, some of you think that. I'm just telling you what I think. And that is a posture of, hey, I'm not coming after you, I'm not attacking you, I'm not judging you for the way that you feel, I'm just telling you how I feel. And then that leaves them all of that room to fill in the blanks with like, oh yeah, I think I feel that way too. And then if you were able to overcome that, they can borrow some bravery from you and they realize that they can overcome it too. And that brings us to step number 4. And that's what life is like now because of It Works. Now, top leaders, I really want you guys to pay attention to this part because I know you've done some amazing things. You've earned some big bonuses, you've accomplished the most incredible things. And guess what? I just want to stop and say, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you've overcome and what you've accomplished. And I know you want to shout it from the rooftops, and we want you to, but keep it, when you're telling your story, for potential in perspective, 20%. 20% about your successes and 80% about that struggle in the beginning. Newbies, this is so exciting for you. If you just joined the business a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, maybe even a couple hours ago, that 80% of your story focused on what life was like before It Works, you already have that down. That magic of the story, you can tell time and time again, even if you just joined, because we all have that story before we even start. So 20% the successes that you've had because of It Works. The reason I want you to keep that so slim is because I want you to leave plenty of room for the person listening to your story to be able to fill in the blanks with their own dreams. I love getting to share that I was able to relieve the financial burdens while my husband walked through a cancer battle a couple of years ago. That is a big triumph and a big victory in my life that I love getting to share because I know that other people have been through hard things. In a business like this, to have that kind of financial relief would make a world of difference for them. But I just want to share about that briefly because chances are they don't have the exact same dream that I do. There's something else that they want. And when I leave a little bit of white space, that gives them the room to insert their dream so they can see themselves in my story. Because where the magic really happens and where they really feel connected to and invited to join my story, which is step number 5, is when they feel connected and they can see themselves in the story. So number 5, we're going to invite them into the story. We've just created all this room for them to see themselves as part of our story, but they need that final 1-2 punch, that true invitation so they feel welcome to be part of your story. Remember that one of my skepticisms was, I don't know if I was the kind of person she would want to work with. But by giving an invitation, that was when I finally reached out and wanted to join the business, was because she gave a phone number for me to text and a simple emoji for me to text to that number. And suddenly all the walls went away. Everything that was holding me back from joining that business, that all went away, and I realized, hey, I have an open invitation to start this business. So that's your call to action. Okay. I want you to realize that throughout telling my story, and as I'm teaching you to tell yours, the most important piece of this is that you connect emotionally with your listener. And the reason for that is I want that emotional connection to be created so that your listener feels the same as you. We're social media marketers. We do a lot of things behind a screen. There are filters and edited words, and it can feel polarizing. But when we take all of that away and we just tell our story and we're raw and we're real and we're vulnerable and we're humble, that creates this emotional connection where our potentials trust us. Remember to focus on just telling your story. That's your only job, is to tell your story. Because when you focus on inspiring people, the reality is that when we try to inspire someone, we rarely do. And that's because when we focus on just being inspirational, we end up just sharing a bunch of lines from a book or cliches or things that people have heard 100 times before. And when you hear something over and over and over again, it loses a little bit of its power. But there is one thing that you can guarantee they have never heard before, and that's your story. Because you are the only one who has your story. And so that's your power. That's your power and that's your connection, because no one else can tell the story the way that you can. And no one else can reach the person that you're meant to reach, because no one else will relate to your story like the person that's walked through something similar to you. That's where you're going to build that bridge and that connection. And let me give you a tip. We're in this big sea of network marketers. There's a lot out there. Let's just be honest. There are people with these incredible minds for comp plans. There are people that make a lot of money. There are people that are way smarter about the products than we are. But you may not be any of those things. You may not be the smartest, the highest paid, the best knowledgeable about the comp plan, but what you have is your story. The power of your unique story. And if you learn to leverage that and to tell your story in a powerful new way every single day, it will carry more weight with your potentials, the people that were meant to come into your business, than any of those other impressive qualifications. So take this formula, fill it out with your unique story. Don't be afraid to tell it over and over and over again. Sometimes I focus more on my husband's cancer journey. Sometimes I focus more on being a stay-at-home mom. So you get to choose each day the story that you tell. And this flow will help you tell different parts of your story over and over and over again in a way that's going to build you a lasting, authentic, impactful business. No one else can tell your story, and you can reach people that nobody else can. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the event. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes, and I cannot wait